Okay guys, so welcome to my second kill team video. This one is a faction based one, so this is more of a tutorial compared to last time, which was a battle report. And today we're looking very specifically at the Astra Militarum kill team. These are my go-to kill team really whenever I'm playing locally. I think they've got a lot of depth and a lot of strength, which is surprising, and they can also bring a higher sort of number. Not so much necessarily a horde, but they're definitely very competitive and can definitely hold objectives quite easily. And part of what makes them so good is their adaptability with the weapons they can take and how much their orders can impact. So in this video we'll look at a bit of detail into the weapons. We'll look at the detail of their orders and how you can use them to beat most opponents and to get around the board quite easily. We'll look at what specialists there are that these guys can take, and which of these you should look to combine to sort of make some real heavy hitters and to dominate the game, even with a much tougher opponent or a much stronger opponent with power armor or with disgusting resilience and things like that with the Death Guard. So the guys on the screen you've got at the moment, these are my main sort of team. There's 100 points worth there. They're painted up in the Drop Force Imperator armor, which is a red uniform, black armor with gold trim, and this is the armor you'll see on the Kill Team box set if you bought the Astra Militarum. So to start off with, we'll look at what the weapons options are in depth, and then we'll go on to a bit about which specialists you should take and how you can combine people with specialists and orders to make a really effective kill team. Okay, so with the majority of these options you have got two choices. You can either take a Scion or a Guardsman for the team. So first up here we've got a Tempesta on the left and a Sergeant on the right. So these are going to be your leaders realistically. There is an option to take a Guardsman Special Weapons as a leader, which you can do some funny things with orders and make you a little bit more competitive perhaps in close combat. However, realistically for fluff purposes, you're going to go with one of these two models. So on the left here I've got the Tempesta with the Power Fist and a Plasma Pistol. That's not a bad setup. Your choices really are Power Fist, Chainsword or Power Sword. And on the right you've got the Plasma Pistol and Power Sword. So these guys, really it depends on the battle you're playing. I prefer to go with a Sergeant. He can give orders to either the Guardsmen or the Scions. He costs me 5 models. He costs 7 with the Plasma Pistol and Power Sword, just to make him a little bit more impactful. And that Plasma Pistol really does make a difference against power armor. And as does the Power Sword or the Power Fist, depending on which way you're going. But for 7 points, he gets you your 2 command points each turn, and he gives you that access to orders. Really cheap, really useful. So that was who I would go with pretty much every battle, unless I'm fighting some tough guys and I want to have something in close combat, or I'm going all Scions, in which case we'll take the Tempesta on the left. Okay, so the first special weapon I'm going to talk about is the Melter Gun. You can see it here, it's quite clearly distinctive. It's got a large cylindrical barrel with some vent marks on the side. With the Astra Militarum in kill team, the Guardsmen on the left, they're always hitting on 4s, that's their default weapon skill. Scions hitting on 3s, so they're much more accurate and they are a bit more durable with their armor saves. So the Melter Gun in kill team is the most powerful gun that the Guardsman can take. It is strength 9, so you're going to be wounding most kill team opponents on a 2, and it's -4 AP. There's not a lot of invuln saves in kill team, so the majority of people you target with this on the core game are not going to get an armor save, and it's D6 damage, which for me is really where the strength of this gun lies. With Kill Team, the amount of damage you have on your weapon decides how many dice you roll to see if the opponent goes out of action. So these guys have d6 damage, so yeah, you've got a chance of getting up to 6 dice to get a 4 up to get the opponent out of action on the first attempt. These guys are really solid against Space Marines, and depending on which of them you take, they can be quite cheap. The Guardsman version is 8 points to take. The Scion Gunner is 13 points. So there's a larger difference there, but the Scion Gunner is hitting on 3s. It's a lot more accurate. And as we'll come on to later, if you use other specialists, that can go down to a 2. You can get opportunities to reroll 1s just to make sure of it and things like that, which we'll talk about. So he's quite straightforward. I don't tend to make either of these specialists, but there are options there. For example, if you really wanted to, you could make him a heavy specialist, which would mean that you can advance and charge him up the field and have no penalties to your hit rolls, so you're still hitting on 3s for that Scion Gunner and 4s for the Guardsman. So these are powerful guns, but I wouldn't necessarily take them against hordes and things like that unless you really wanted to kill a particularly strong boss. But even then, you might want to take a plasma gunner because they get more shots. So this is one shot hand cannon weapon. So next up, certainly in terms of strength, we've got the plasma gun. This is a rapid fire 1 weapon, so within 12 inches you get 2 shots, and that's really the area you want to be operating in. So again, we've got the Guardsman and Scion equivalent here. The Guardsman, again, it's cheap. It's 8 points to take an extra plasma, and I know that's part of, certainly when Kill Team was first coming out, you had these teams of 8 plasmas, maybe even 9 with a sergeant having a plasma pistol. So if you're going up against Marines, that can be really quite powerful and really a real difficulty to save against. Where the strength lies for the plasma is, for me, it's how you can overcharge it. Again, we're looking at how many damage dice you roll for the flesh wounds. So if you're overcharging the plasmas, you get 2 damage. But there are inherent risks in that. So if you're rolling 1s, you're going to get the plasma gun blow up in your face. Which is why with the plasmas, I have recently started running a plasma sniper. So part of the ability of a sniper is you automatically reroll 1s. So you're not going to have it blow up in your face. You can reroll that 1, and if you're really struggling, then you could even use a command point. There is another option, which is to give the plasma gunner an order, which would be take aim from your sergeant, and that means that again he gets to reroll 1s shooting. But personally, I like to make him a sniper and then give him the bring it down, so he's generally hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, 2s if you give him a comms specialist. So hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, wounding on 2s, rerolling 1s, -3 AP, so maybe a 6 up save for some people, and then 2 chances to get the opponent off the board. It's very good if you double him up with a comms specialist to give him the scanner, so he's -1s to hit, allowing him to hit on 2s, reroll 1s for both hits and wounds. So next up, you've got my personal favourites, which are the Flamers. These guys are the best option really you can take for the General Guardsman, and I'll come on to why in a second. On the left I've got a standard flamer, on the right I've got a heavy flamer. The only reason he's got a heavy is just so I know when I look at that model he's going to be my demolitions specialist. And making him a demo specialist is really quite key. So with these guys, their strength is they're cheap, they cost you 8 points, but they are effective and accurate because they are auto hitting. So it doesn't matter that a guardsman hits on 4s because you are automatically hitting when you're within that 8-inch range. There is an option to take a Scion Flamer. which I have used in Scion only teams, and that just gives you access to a 4-up save, but that's costing 13 points instead of 8. So you think for 3 more points I could take 2 instead of 1 and get a lot more variety and a lot more maneuverability. I've used these guys to great effect in a number of situations. They're assault weapons, so if you're going to move, you might as well advance with them because of readied and moved. I've used them as an offensive group in defensive games. For example, the game where you have to the enemy has to get off the board. I've charged these guys straight up the center of the board and held the enemy back. They're really awkward to charge against because of those auto hits. They're automatically hitting an Overwatch, so they're really deadly if you put them in the right places, and it can really chip away at your opponent's morale, because he's charging people, especially if he's a close combat army like Orcs or Tyranids. He's charging people at them, and you're just setting them alight. And I've used that to great effect. With the demo specialist, that means that if the opponent is obscured, which if you put your model in the right place, he will be, it's -1s to the wound rolls. So it's a strength 4. So if you're going up against the sort of more heavily armoured Space Marines, you're going to be wounding on 4s and then minusing 1 from that, so on 3s. And then for another command point, you can minus another wound for special ammunition. So you've got Breacher and special ammunition. So you're suddenly wounding a Space Marine on a 2 with a flamer. Yeah, he's got to make some saves, but you've D6 auto hits. So you're generally going to get all your wounds. So you've got up to 6 chances to make him fail that armor save. So these guys are great against Hordes and against Space Marines. So coming in as my favourite special weapon for the Scions, which is a unique special weapon to them as far as I'm aware, is the Hotshot Volley Gun. So this weapon I think is hugely underrated. I've played it against an Orc player locally, didn't really know what they were. He had some guard himself, hadn't really bothered putting these on his models, didn't know how effective they can be, especially when you make one of these guys a heavy specialist. Okay, so this weapon, it's 4 shots, which is awesome. It's strength 4, so against most people it's wounding on 4s or 3s. These guys are really accurate, as I've said before. They're hitting on 3s with 4 shots. Put a comm specialist with them, they're hitting on 3s with hitting on 2s with 4 shots. Give them an order like take aim, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. They can be really accurate, get those hits in. It's strength 4, which can cause a lot of issues, and it's -2 AP. So again, a lot of people are going to struggle to make a 5-up or not even get a chance to save it. I really rate taking them as a heavy specialist because you get the access to the stratagem, which is more bullets. So suddenly you're firing an additional shot. So you've got 5 shots, hitting on 3s or 2s, re-rolling 1s if you're being clever about your orders, and you're gonna get through their armor saves with that -2 AP. They're also really good in Overwatch. They're not auto hitting, but again, you're getting 4 shots to get that 6, and if you use defensive stand for a couple of points, they're hitting on 5s and 6s as well. So these are really solid. So here we have my Voxcaster. He's a guardsman. You can take Voxcaster on Scions. I haven't got any painted, hence why this guy's sitting on his own. And that's mostly because I don't really think you need them. Suddenly that's getting very expensive because it's 9 for your basic Scion plus 5 for the Voxcaster. So it's 14 models just for that Voxcaster. And depending how you use them, really not worth it. My stratagem with this guy is, if you're going to use him as a comm specialist, to stick him somewhere where he can give that buff to someone like a Melter, a Plasma, or one of the Hotshot Volley Gunners and make them really quite accurate. The Voxcaster ability means that you can re-roll failed nerve tests, so again that's really strong. So for 10 points, it's definitely worth taking one. I wouldn't suggest it's worth taking one for 14 as a Scion. And if you combine him with other people's specialisms and some of the orders, this guy can really buff everyone else. So let's keep him fairly safe, like our sergeant, but in a position where he can give that buff to our heavy hitters. So rate him as a comms specialist, but it does depend who you're taking and who you're up against. So the next guys I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them, but these are the grenade launchers. They can be useful. You've got the frag grenade option, but that is a strength 3. They also have the crack grenade, but I wouldn't personally take that over a plasma gun or a melter gun for that penetration. These guys, in my mind, are a little bit of a filler because it costs only 2 extra points instead of 3 like everything else. You know, the guardsman option is costing you 7, the Scion costing you 12. These guys can kind of fill in if you've got a few surplus points or you've not quite got enough to run a full team of special weapons with plasmas and melters, and you think, you know what, I want something else there just to give me a bit of variety. Let's stick a grenade launcher in. 100% go for it. I've never really bothered making them specialists. I don't particularly rate them massively over the other options, but I'd certainly take one over a trooper with a standard las gun. So they've got their place, and they can help you fill in and still be worth their points. But I think you're better off looking at spending another point, getting a flamer or getting a hotshot volley gunner, and running with that instead. And similarly with the snipers, these guys can fill a spot in your team. You can take one of these with 6 points, which perhaps frees you up to take some extra bodies on the field. The strength 4, so that can be useful if you're going up against light strength, or you just want more strength 4 weapons. But there's no AP, which to me is a bit of a pain. But there is if you wound someone on a 6, you get the headshot, which I have had happen to me quite regularly, and you think, oh, actually maybe I'm not giving them their dues, but I don't seem to roll a lot of 6s with these guys. I have used these guys to great effect when I'm going up against an elite faction. So I've played these against Grey Knights. So I had a team of 4 of these, so they only cost me 6 each. My thinking behind that was I stuck them somewhere where they could see, they've got a really long range, and suddenly the psychics couldn't smite them, because, or whatever the kill team version of psych is, Cybolt. They couldn't do that because they were too far away. And because these guys were so cheap, I could then get a load more normal guardsmen to stick with someone who's got a plasma or a melter, who was going to be the nearest unit, so the Psyker had to target him with the psychic weapon. And these guys were plinking away, trying to get their headshots, and really changing the way my opponent was having to think about the fight, and giving a bit more freedom to my plasmas and melters to cause a lot more damage. So they can be used to great effect, but as a general rule, I certainly wouldn't take one as a sniper specialist because they're hitting on 4s. And I wouldn't use my comms scanner to make that better when I can use it on a plasma or a melter instead, who are going to do a lot more damage with that armor piercing. So these guys are alright, but you've got to use them well, or use them to make more room for boots on the ground. And lastly, we have the Noble Guardsmen. Not much to say about these guys. They're cheap fillers. Rapid fire 2s, rapid fire 1s with strength 3, -2 AP on the Scion hotshot gunner, but realistically these are just going to be there to secure objectives, or to be the one that takes the hit to protect your special weapons. So the next thing I'm going to talk about are the orders, which is a unique thing to the Astra Militarum. These are based on the 40k orders, except we haven't got first rank fire, second rank fire. So from left to right, we've got Take Aim, which allows you to hit reroll hits of 1, which is useful against useful with your plasma guns, your melter guns, when you use them in conjunction with careful aim, which is a sniper tactic, or the comm specialist. Bring it down, which rerolls 1s to wound. So again, if you really want to make sure of that plasma or a melter shot, it's a good order to give. The next one you've got is forwards for the Emperor, which allows you to advance and shoot in the same phase. So that again can make your plasma gunner a lot more mobile and take your enemy by surprise, because they'll know it's a rapid fire weapon if they know anything about plasma guns, but they won't be expecting you to still be able to shoot with it. Get back in the fight. Again, this is a real leveler against close combat armies. If you can survive that close combat, you can fool your plasma guy or your flame or whoever it is back, give them get back in the fight, and they get to shoot and blow the enemy away on a one-to-one basis. This is really, really strong. Next, you've got move, move, move. Now, this is a really useful one in games like Arena or anything objective-based, because it means you can charge that objective. So you can sort of move your guy up and the opponent thinks, okay, he's obviously going for that objective, but he's not quite there yet. Suddenly you give him move, 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 and you get to advance and take that objective. And suddenly there might be a few victory points behind, or they've now got to battle for that objective when you're going to be ready the next turn. And this can really help with that objective-based game. And finally, we've got fixed bayonets. This can be useful. You can run sergeants and tempesters in the same team. So the idea of fixed bayonets is in the shooting phase, if one of your guys is in close combat, they get to fight as if it's the fight phase. So it gives you a free punch, as it were. So if you're giving that order to someone who's a close combat specialist, so if you're a sergeant giving it to a tempester in close combat, that can really be useful. If not, it might just be that you want to give your guardsmen a bit more chance to try and wear the enemy down. You're not going to use the order for anything else, so fine. Let's go for fixed bayonets and give him a free hit in the shooting phase instead of the fight phase. So these orders are really useful. From what I understand, you do have to declare them at the beginning of the shooting phase. So that means that you can't suddenly halfway through go, oh yeah, I'm going to give him that. You need to tell your opponent first, and that may affect who they target. So use them carefully, but they are very useful. They can really level you against some of the higher tier gamers, and they can make you a lot more adaptable to what's in front of you. So the very last thing I'm going to talk about briefly, I've gone through the weapons and the specialists you can run with them. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the kill teams themselves, particularly thinking about the recent Elites release. So first up, we've got the Tempesta Scions. So these guys are good for the special weapons. The hotshot volley gunners are good. The plasmas are awesome. The melters are awesome. So what bonus is there in taking a Scion only team? Well, if you're running Elites rules, it means that if you're in half range, 6s generate more shots, and that is, in my opinion, a really good ability. I used it recently in a game, and suddenly you had a Tempesta with a little plasma pistol. We shot once and got 2 hits, and because it was plasma, he got 2 wounds and blew the guy away quite comfortably. It is useful. It does limit your ability to take objectives and takes away from that strength in numbers that you kind of get if you link these guys with the guardsmen. But if you're running perhaps a Bulgarin or an Ogrein, you might want to give these guys around him in support. I don't think that this ability is worth not taking an extra 4 special weapons, though. I think take 8 special weapons is really useful. Don't have to be the same special weapons. Hopefully you've got the idea from this video. These guys can be really flexible. You can outshoot people with the plasmas and the melters, or you can charge at them and hit them with the flamers. So use that adaptability and that flexibility rather than shoehorning into one particular group. With the Cadians, they have the ability to reroll ones if you don't move. So basically, if you're readied, it's not amazing, but it means that you can still take Scions with the Cadian army. They don't get to reroll ones as Scions, but it means that you can still take the variety of special weapons that you couldn't take if you were running Scions only. So I generally run with that. I go with the Cadians. I've thought about the Catachan or the Catachan or however you pronounce it, with their buffs to strength and leadership. I don't have any Catachan models, so I haven't really thought about running it. I can only see that being useful in close combat, which I don't like getting my guardsmen in close combat. I like to get them shooting, get them maneuvering around, and in this game being quite tactical with them, deciding what special weapons going where and what purpose he's gonna have. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video. This was done on request. I probably should have mentioned that earlier. Someone asked me to talk through the guardsmen because I can be very good with them and play a completely different game against orcs compared to Deathwatch or Grey Knights, because they're that adaptable. And using the kill team roster, these guys can be really useful. Whether you're playing an arena and you're in close combat, or whether you're playing in a nice open game, these guys are really useful. And in my opinion, they're one of the better kill teams. Okay, they will struggle against perhaps Harlequins, who are just close combat only. But on close combat specialists, I've played these guys against a team of Tyranids recently. The first sort of semi-competitive game I played was against orcs with these guys, and literally I lost my 2 flamers, and I tabled the orcs basically. I think there might have been 1 orc commando left. These guys could just do everything. They could take out the bosses with the plasmas. They could destroy the charges with the flamers with the automatic overwatch. These guys are a really strong, solid army. So please let me know your thoughts about the video. This is the first tutorial-y type video I've done. This is the first time I've used a voiceover with a new headset. So feel free to put some comments below. Subscribe. There will be more battle reports, and I'll try and put into place the specialisms and the skills I've shown today in the next kill team report with the guardsmen against maybe some Tyranids. So thank you very much for watching. Yeah, subscribe and comment.